Masechet Ketubot Daf Lamed Gimel. We saw on the previous daf a machloket between Ola and Rabbi Yochanan about the application of Kimle b'derabamine when it comes not to capital punishment but rather to lashes and payment. If one does one action and is liable to both, which one does he get? Not both. Ula says payment only, no lashes. Rabbi Yochanan says he get lashes only, no payment. Ula brought a proof from edim zoamim and injury. Rabbi Yochanan says those are exceptions. And so edim zoamim and injury, someone who caused injury, although that act would make them liable to both lashes and payment, according to Rabbi Yochanan, they get, according to Rabbi Yochanan, usually in such a case one would get lashes, but these are the exceptions, and they pay only and get no lashes. All right, what we're going to do today is a couple of things. First, we're going to ask how come Rabbi Yochanan does not agree with Ola. We'll see a couple of explanations. Then we're going to go into these exceptions and try to find reasons how come edim zomamin pay according to Rabbi Yochanan, since the exception, how come they pay and don't get lashes? And someone who caused injury, also in that case, how come one pays and doesn't get lashes? All right, so we start with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, ma'itama lo amar ki'ula. How come he said one gets lashes and does not pay when one is liable to both? And the first answer is, we're going to reject this. Im ken bitalta ervat ahotecha lo tegale. The punishment of someone who commits incest with his sister is karet. Now, anytime someone is liable to karet, the bet din comes and gives them lashes. That's the equivalent in a human bet din to account for the liability of karet. So sleeping with the sister actually at any age would get lashes. Now, in the case of it, if it's she's also a na'ara, if she's during that age, and the brother violates her forcefully, rapes her, then he would have to pay the fine. And so here's his point. Assuming that we're going to limit the case, we're going to ask about this in a second. But if we assume that we limit the case to the case of the Mishnah, where it's talking about rape, then in that case, if you would say he pays only and does not get lashes, now you have nullified the entire law of erva with a sister, because now he's not going to get lashes. And so that's why this is a proof that Rabbi Yochanan brings and says, in any case you have both that apply, you have to give lashes. Otherwise, what will be the whole point of this mitzvah? Why even say it if you're never going to give lashes? Now the answer is going to be, well, she's not always a na'ara, so maybe only in the case of na'ara he would pay and not get lashes, but when she's not a na'ara, then he would get lashes. Okay, well, that's what we're going to answer. But right now, that's the proof. Now we reject this proof because by the same logic, Rabbi Yochanan's two exceptions also will be a problem. If someone causes an injury, Rabbi Yochanan says, this is one of the exceptions where one pays and does not get lashes. But if he pays and doesn't get lashes, then you have nullified the law of, this is in the context of the bet din, that bet din should strike a person up to 49 and not more, because if they give more, then that's causing injury. From there we learned that not only bet din, but no one can give lashes or injure someone in any way, and the punishment for that is lashes. And so now you want to say the same thing with chovel. Rabbi Yochanan, you agree that someone who injures someone else pays and doesn't get lashes. Well, then aren't you nullifying the whole law of giving lashes to someone who injures? And the same thing would be true for edim zomamin nameh. It can be bin hakot harasha. If someone lies and testifies falsely about someone else, that they have to pay money, and they're found to be edim zomamin, so now they're liable on two counts. Number one, for lying falsely, so that gets lashes, and you have to do kasher zamam. They wanted to make this guy pay, and so now they have to pay. So the law is, Rabbi Yochanan agrees that they pay and don't get lashes. But if so, you have now nullified the law of someone who is a rasha. An example of someone who is a rasha is someone who swears falsely, who deserves lashes, and now they're never going to get lashes. And so by your same logic, if you're going to never want to make sure that you never nullify a law, and that's your whole proof that in general someone has to get lashes, because otherwise you nullified the payment of an Adam or Rasa who is a sister, well then by the same account then you would have to make these people get lashes, the one who injures and Edim Zomin. But that's not true. They pay and you do nullify. So this whole logic can't work. Now we're going to show that in each of the three cases, although yes, in some cases where there's a double punishment, you're only going to get one, and one of the punishments will not happen. But we can always find a case where only one punishment will apply. And so there could be a case of Edim Zomin where one does not pay and only gets lashes. What would that be? Well, in any case that the person is not testifying about someone else that they owe money, but rather, for example, if someone testifies about someone else that, oh, your father was a Kohen and your mother was a Gerusha, or Ben Halusa, and therefore you are an invalid Kohen, and turns out that they're Edim Zomin. So what are you going to do to the Edim? Are you going to make also them invalid Kohanim? What if the witness is not even a Kohen? This is not the kind of thing that you can give a reciprocal punishment. And so the law, this is in Masechet Makot, right in the beginning, is that we give this person lashes. Even though it's not exactly the same as what they tried to do, in cases where you can't do the exact same thing, you give them lashes. And here, even though Edim Zomin generally, if they're liable to both, they would pay and not get lashes. Here, there's no liability to money, so they would certainly get lashes. So therefore, we're not nullifying the law altogether if we say that in the case where he's liable to both, he pays, because there's another case where he would get lashes. The law is not nullified. And same thing, it's true. Injury, usually, case of injury, I would have to pay and get lashes. So therefore we say you only get one, you only pay. But there could be a case where I don't have to pay if I hit someone in such a way that the payment would be less than a peruta. So that's not payable, and therefore I don't have to pay anything. Instead, that person would just get lashes. And so we're not nullifying the law altogether. And we could apply the same logic to the proof that we tried to bring. If someone has relations with his sister, so he would get karet, and the replacement punishment is lashes. And since she's an adult, so there's no payment of a fine of a na'ara. If there's no and she's if it's consensual, so there would be no payment, but rather only there would be lashes. And so, yes, we did not nullify the whole law just because in some cases we have to choose one over the other. Therefore, this whole line of thinking is rejected. And we have another one. Amalach Rabbi Yochanan, hai tachat asher aina mi ba'ele lechede abaye. De'amar Abaye, Amar Kera, Tachat Asher Inaha, Hai Tachat Asher Ina, Mikla De'ika, Boshet Upegam. Rabbi Yochanan will now present a second reason why he rejects Ula. What was Ula's proof? If we remember from back then, he said, it says the word Tachat Asher Ina regarding someone who rapes a Na'ara. And it says Tachat when it says Ayin, Tachat Ayin. So the rabbis make the Gezerah Shava, just like Ayin, Tachat Ayin means payment, so too, this Tachat Asher Aina is going to mean payment. That was Ula's proof that one gives payment. Even though technically someone who rapes a sister is also liable to lashes. So the word Tachat says, no, the payment trumps over giving lashes. So Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't agree with your proof. You know why? Because that pasuk that you used to prove it, I need it for something else. I need it for what Abaye taught. Abaye taught that the pasuk says, Tachat Asher Aina, that the payment that the rapist gives as a fine is only for the Aina, only for violating her. But it's not the full amount of payment. He has to also pay for humiliation and degradation of her. So that's what we learned. This tachat, this payment is only for part of his violation and not for all of it. So since he needs the pasuk for something else, therefore he's not going to agree with Ula's proof. Now we turn to Ula and ask him, well, where are you going to learn this law? Don't you agree with that very law that you also this rapist also has to pay other things? He says, yes, but I can learn it from another place. Not Abaye's derivation, but Ava's derivation. Pasuk says that the man who slept with her gives to the father of the Na'ara 50 kesef. Now, why do you have to say who slept with her? Just say Natan Ha'ish. Who else is paying the fine? It's obviously the one who violated her. So why do you have to say the one who slept with her? It means that payment of the fine is only for his pleasure of that he got from sleeping with her, but is not the full payment. He has to also pay humiliation and degradation. Since Ula has another place to derive that from, for him, the Tachat Asher Aina is available to make the Gezerah Shava, that one gives payment over lashes. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, I use that pasuk for something else, and therefore, he says in general, lashes overcomes payment. All right, so now we understand why Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Ula. And now we're going to analyze these cases where Rabbi Yochanan says are exceptions, where one pays rather than get lashes, even though one is theoretically liable to both. Let's analyze the source of these cases. Now, regarding Edim Zomin, we already did see one source of Rabbi Il'ah, who said Yad Tachat Yad, that you have to do to the witness as he tried to do. And one of the things that you have to, or examples are Yad Tachat Yad. We learned that Yad Tachat Yad, why do we need to add that? And that means something that is given from hand to hand, and that is money. And so that's how we learned that if Edim Zomin are liable to pay money and lashes, they only pay money. Good. And now, that was a good derivation, but then we're going to find another one. It would be Eliezer Omer. Edim Zomin mamona mishalemem ulkala lakeh. Edim Zomin, they pay money and they do not get lashes if they require both, right? There are cases that they would get only lashes, like we saw. Mishum de la benehat rani nuhis is a different reason altogether, because there's no way to give a warning to Edim Zomemin. And here's a general rule. If you don't give a warning to someone, you can make them pay, but you can't give them corporeal punishment. Corporeal punishment, capital punishment, or lashes, you can only give to a sinner if you warn them before they did it. Hey, don't you know if you do this, then you're going to get this punishment? And they say yes, and they do it anyway. Then you can. But Edim Zomemin, there's no way to give them a warning, and that's why we can't give them lashes. Now, Amar Rava is going to back up Rabbi Eliezer and explain why we can't warn the witnesses before they testify and say, hey, if you do this falsely, you're going to get lashes. Teda nitri behu emat. The reason is simply practical. When are we going to warn them? Nitru behu me'ikara amre ishtalyan. If as soon as they come in, way beforehand, before their actually testimony, they have to go through whole processing. So if it's significantly before they testify, then by the time they testify, they're going to say, "Oh, we forgot about that warning. We were thinking about so many other things. There's a lot of procedures. We forgot about the warning, and therefore you can't give us lashes." And so the rule is that the warning has to be immediately before the sin. Now, so how about right before they're about to testify, we'll give them this warning and said, listen, you should know, if you're found to be false, you're going to get this very same punishment that you're trying to give. Then we're going to scare them off and they're not going to want to testify. Unlike on all other cases where we want to scare the person off, if we see someone about to murder, all right, or violate Shabbat or anything, so we want to scare them off and we want to tell them, hey, you're going to get stoned for this, you're going to get punished for this. But here, we don't want to scare them too much. I mean, we don't want them to lie, for sure, but, they might just say, even if I'm telling the truth, you know what, I'll keep it safe. I don't want to put myself in jeopardy that maybe someone will come and falsely accuse us of being in Boston at the same time or something. And so we don't want to do it right before. So how about we give them the warning after? Let them testify first. And then afterwards we'll tell them, hey, listen, if you swore falsely, then you'll get the same punishment. No, what happened already happened. Once they testify, they can't take it back anymore. And so you see, there's just practically no way to warn them. That's what Rava explains on behalf of Rabbi Eliezer. But Abaye disagrees. How about wait till they testify? After they testify, immediately, within a time it takes to say hello, just a few seconds, Shalom Alecha Rabbi, right? There's a general rule that if one says something, but you didn't finish speaking, and within a few seconds you correct yourself, then you can undo what you said before. Like you say the wrong beracha, you say, Borei mina mezonot, then you realize, it's supposed to be ha'etz, immediately say, Borei Pri ha'etz. That's okay. You don't have to go back and say the whole beracha. You can correct it. So too with testimony, if they just finished saying the testimony, within a few seconds, they can go back and say, so you know what, within a few seconds, they finish their testimony, say, hey, listen, if you swore falsely, you're going to get punished the same way. Are you sure you don't want to take it back? So now that they testified already, then they're not going to be too scared to testify, and we do it within that moment, and so we don't say ma'id habhava. They can still take it back. So Abaye says is perfectly capable of warning the witnesses, and so therefore there's no reason why they shouldn't get lashes. And furthermore, he also rejects Rava and says v'nitri behu meikara v'nilmad behu demuzeh. Here's another way you could do it. When they come in earlier on, you give them the full warning. If you swear false, you're going to get the very same thing. And then you go through the processing, and then it might be a couple of hours later, but then right before they testify, you just give them a quick reminder, right? Just remember that, remember we said about the lying thing. Okay, go ahead, right? And that way they won't be too scared, and it will be, but it will be right before they do it, and they can't say that we forgot. So that's another way you could do it. And so, therefore, based on this, we don't have a proof. Rabbi Eliezer's proof is no good. But then, Hadad Amar Abaye, see how intellectually honest he was, right? Even though he rejected his colleague Rava, he thought about it more and says, you know what? La mir tahid amari, forget the rejection that I said. I actually agree with you. Because if you think that edim zomin always require warning, well, then it doesn't make sense. Well, that would mean that if we don't warn edim zomin, and according to the if you say that we need it and we don't have it, then there would be a problem, right? It has to be actually that we don't need to warn them, and we still give them the punishment, right? Why? Because if we would not warn them, if you would need to warn them and you didn't warn them, then you wouldn't be able to give them capital punishment, and then you'd have a problem. The rule is you have to do to them as they did to try to do to someone else. Let's say witnesses come and they say, these other guys, the defendant is a murderer. Now, they're swearing falsely. So that guy, the defendant, they tried to kill him. Now, the defendant never got warned. The defendant never did anything, right? He was innocent, and so he never did a crime. He never needed to get warned. He never did get warned. And they tried to kill him without warning. So, you see that they tried to kill him without warning, and yet, in order to kill the witnesses, you're going to tell me that they need a warning? Can't be, right? The punishment has to be equivalent to what they tried to do. Just like they tried to kill someone without warning, so too, edim zomin, you can kill without warning. Otherwise, the whole law would be nullified. You would never be able to do it. And therefore, Abaye says, you know what? I take back what I said. I agree with Rava. For a slightly different reason. It's not that technically you can't find a time to warn them. It's that fundamentally, edim zomin are different from other types of crimes. They do not require a warning. And therefore, Rabbi Eliezer's original proof is upheld, even though they don't get a warning. That's for capital punishment. But in terms of giving them lashes for lying, that they would need a warning, but they don't get a warning. So edim zomin don't require a warning. In order to give them lashes, however, they would require a warning, and therefore you can't give them lashes. That's why they pay over giving lashes, unless, of course, it's a case where the lashes are the only punishment, in which case they do get lashes. Okay, matkif la Rav Sama bered Rav Yirmiyah. So now we have another challenge of this proof. La me'ata ben girusha ben halusa de lo mi ka'asher zamam ka mitrabi liba hatra'a. And so he's asking a question from this very case of ben girusha ben halusa, where they are getting punished not because asher zamam, not because they didn't try to give someone lashes, they tried to call someone a halal. And so we don't make the edim zomin halalim. Instead, we give them lashes. Now, they're getting lashes not because that's what they tried to do. That was your proof, is from that they don't get lashes is because they tried to kill someone, so they should get killed without warning. But here, we're giving them lashes because of the general rule of them lying. And so therefore, how could we give them lashes without giving them warning? It must be that we do give them a warning. So so it's a serious question. How could you ever give someone lashes, edim zomin lashes, if you just said that they never require lashes? And the answer is, since Pasuk says it has to be one law in all cases, so we draw it across the board. Even though technically you're right, if edim zomin, if they testified against someone and would require the defendant lashes, then for sure they would get lashes because they wanted to give someone lashes without warning, so they deserve to get lashes without warning. In this case of ben gerusha ben cholusa, although you're right, technically they're getting lashes on account of falsely lying, and in that case they should require forewarning. But since we say, you know what, we're going to make the same law across the board, and in most cases, the Adim Zomin will get corporeal punishment without warning, so too, in this case of Ben Chalusa, Ben Gerusha, even though they didn't get warning, they still get lashes. Okay, and so we have an answer, and that is, we uphold it to be Eliezer's proof, and so that's the explanation, another derivation of why edim zomin pay rather than get lashes. And now we move on to injury. Rav Shisha bered Rav Idi Amar, Chober b'chavero nameh, mamona meshalem umilka la lakeh. He will, someone who gives an injury, technically, we learned from the 40 that he should be hit and not more, that someone who injures someone else deserves lashes, but they also have to pay. So when they're liable to both, even if Rabbi Yochanan agrees, they pay and not get lashes. What's a source? We already saw a source before, but here's another one. Mehacha. In Shemot gives a double case. All right, the first half of the case says, if two men are fighting and they knock into a pregnant woman and cause her a miscarriage, they have to pay money for the fetus that they caused to miscarry. So that's payment. The second clause says, and if there is a son, meaning if they do harm to the mother, and if they, let's say, kill the mother, then v'natata nefesh tachat nafesh. So, what kind of case are we talking about? When these men are fighting, are they just, trying to injure each other or trying to kill each other? Rabbi Elazar says they must be trying to kill each other. How do you know? Because the second clause says, if they cause harm to the mother and they kill the mother, then you give life for a life. And Rabbi Elazar takes that literally as capital punishment. So therefore, in the second clause, one man is trying to kill another man. By mistake, he punches, and the punch lands on the woman, and the woman dies. That is still considered murder. It's called legal principles transferred intent. I have intention to kill one person, I miss and kill another person, I'm still liable to murder. Okay, so now we know that it's a case of murder. This is significant, by the way, for what halakha thinks of in terms of a fetus. Is it a life or not? Well, here, he intended to murder, but only if he kills the mother, then he gets capital punishment. If he caused a miscarriage, he does not get capital punishment. So he pays. So even though it's liable and not permitted, it's still not capital punishment for killing the fetus. Okay, so now we understand that this is talking about where they're trying to kill each other. Now, in what case, was there warning or not? If there was no warning, meaning warning one of the men, hey, if you kill this guy, you're going to be a murderer and get capital punishment. So if there was no warning, so why would you give him capital punishment, whether he killed the other guy or he killed the woman? There's no warning. You can't give him capital punishment. Rather, must be that he did give him warning. Umutre ledavar hamor have mutre ledavar hakal. And let's assume, this is not agreed to by everybody, let's assume that if I give a warning for something more stringent, it applies for something less stringent as well. And so that if I warn someone, I says, hey, if you kill this person, you're going to get liable to the death penalty. Now, in the end, they only caused a miscarriage, which is not murder. But nevertheless, since I gave him a warning for something that was very stringent, that counts for anything less stringent than that. So this person is warned. And yet, the pasuk says in the first case that if there is no damage to the mother, but rather only to the fetus, he pays money. And here you go. Here is a case where for sure this guy was warned. It's true, he was warned for murder, but that counts for injury also. So he was warned in a way that counts for injury, and he caused an injury, and therefore he is technically liable to both lashes for causing the injury with warning, and he also has to pay. And what does the pasuk say? He pays only. That means he pays and does not get a warning and does not get lashes. And from here, brilliant proof by Rav Shisha that anyone who injures pays and does not get lashes. All right, and now we're going to challenge this. First of all, you assume that a warning for something more stringent counts for something less stringent. Maybe not, right? Maybe the warning has to be for the actual crime that he ends up doing. He didn't end up murdering someone. He ended up injuring someone, and so that needs a separate warning. So maybe there's no warning here. How do you know that? Maybe it's not a warning, and therefore that would reject the proof. And even if you say, there is a warning, the warning for the greater counts for the lesser, who told you that capital punishment, death penalty, is worse than lashes? Now, by looking at this strange, what do you mean? Of course, death penalty is worse than lashes. Well, we're going to show not necessarily. If you're talking about torture, right? Many people would say, I'd rather be killed quickly than tortured, right? And so we see a case exactly of that, where someone would rather be hit, many would rather be killed rather than flogged endlessly until the point that they're tortured. Dilma malkot hamur. How do you know? Maybe getting lashes is worse than death. An amazing statement. The friends of Daniel, who the king told him, hey, go and do idolatry, or else we're going to throw you into the furnace. And they said, throw us into the furnace. And so they were thrown into the furnace. Miraculously, they were saved. And so they were willing to die, al kiddush Hashem. So they're remembered for their righteous bravery. Nevertheless, Rav said, they were willing to give their lives. But if the king came and said, hey, I'm going to torture you and give you lashes unless you go and do idolatry, they would have bowed down to the idol, right? They would not have withstood torture, right? And so you see here that sometimes it's easier to accept death than it is lashes. So maybe lashes is worse. And it was in fact worse, and therefore when we gave a warning to the man fighting, hey, if your murder is not, you're going to get this. So he will say, and then he ends up only injuring. He'll say, oh, you only give me a warning for murder, for capital punishment. Oh, you didn't tell me about lashes. Oh, then I wouldn't have done it. Okay, now this is paradoxical, and we're going to answer it. Amar le Rav Asama b'red Rav Aseh le Rav Ashev Amri la Rav Sama b'red Rav Ashe le Rav Ashe, either Rav Aseh or Rav Ashe told Rav Ashe, said, the son of one of them told Rav Ashe, La shani lach ben haka'ash yesh ba kispa l'haka'ash en ba kispa. Don't you think there's a difference between flogging that has a limit and flogging that has no limit? When we're talking about a punishment by Torah law, by a court, so then they give up to 40. Right? And not more, 39. And so therefore, that for sure is better than a death penalty, right? When you know psychologically, because it's going to be only as much as a person can handle, and the worst case would be 39. If the person can't handle that much, then it'll be less. So that, it is going to hurt a lot, but that is more, that is bearable, more bearable than flogging that has no limit, the kind that's meant to torture someone that the king would have given Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. That's completely different. And so therefore he's rejecting this line of thinking, rejecting the challenge, and therefore upholding the original proof. And in fact, we can assume that there was there was a warning here, and the warning, even though it was a warning for something more stringent, it will cover something less stringent, although that is an open possibility that we didn't answer. But this is according to that opinion that says a more stringent warning covers for something less stringent. In this case, we can say there was warning, and nevertheless, if he does only injury, he pays and does not get lashes. So this is a good proof. Hold on, we have another challenge. מתקיף לרב יעקב בן הרפקוד, הניחא לרבנן דאמרי נפש ממש אל רבי דאמר ממון, מה יקרא לממר. These pesukim in Shemot, there's a totally different reading by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. And he says, when it says if there is a son, meaning if there is a death to the mother, then nefesh tachad nafesh. But nefesh tachad nafesh, he says, is not mamash, the capital punishment, but rather only paying. Why is it Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi say that? Because he thinks we're talking about a case where the two men are fighting not to the death. They're not trying to kill each other. They're only trying to injure each other. Since they're only trying to injure each other, if one of them, goes to punch this one, but by mistake he punches a pregnant woman, since he never had intent to kill, even if the woman dies, he does not get the death penalty. So we're not talking about death penalty at all, and so therefore he says, how do you know we're talking about something that would require death penalty? And then that led you to the question, therefore there must be a warning, right? Maybe we're not talking about that at all, and so therefore your proof goes out the window. There didn't have to necessarily be a warning because there's no capital punishment. So rather Rabbi Yaakov is going to give a different proof altogether for why someone who injures has to pay and not get lashes. If someone injures someone else and he is now in the hospital, and even if he doesn't die right away, if he dies from his wounds, so then he will be liable capital punishment. But if he gets better, and he goes and he can leave the hospital and he walks around, and even if he has a staff, he walks around with a staff, and then he dies after that. So the person who did the injury is absolved from guilt, right? Even though he injured him, but the guy got better. He only died afterwards. So it's not my fault. Okay, that's the law. Now, why does the pasuk have to say this? Tell us this. Would anyone think that if there's someone who's walking around, he's just fine, that you give capital punishment to one who injured him? Why would you give him capital punishment? He didn't kill anyone. Rather, this pasuk teaches that he injures someone else, and the guy goes to the hospital. We take the guy who caused the injury and put him in jail for probation. We have to see what happens. If the person who went to the hospital dies, then he gets capital punishment. In other words, you could be liable to murder even if you don't kill the person instantaneously. And if he doesn't die and he gets up and he's fine, then he has to pay money. He has to pay shibto, right, for the time he got off from work, and he has to pay for the medical bills, so he has to pay. Good. Now that's the law. Let's analyze the law. Was there warning or not? If there was no warning, then why would you ever give the guy who injured capital punishment? Right? Even if he killed him, but there was no warning, so you can't give him capital punishment. It has to be that we did warn him. And we're going to assume again, like before, that someone who's warned for something more stringent will cover something less stringent. And since you warned him and say, hey, if you injured this person and cause him death, then you get the death penalty. Well, in the end, he didn't kill him, but only injured him, then it's considered a warning for injury also. And yet, if the injurer harms the person, but he gets up and walks, so what's the punishment? The liability is he has to pay. He has to pay for his medical bills and time from work and other things. And so we see here a case where definitely he was warned, and since he was warned, theoretically, the injurer should get lashes. Anyone who injures someone should get lashes because he's wicked, and he also has to pay. And the pasuk here says he gets paid, only pays, does not get lashes. And so here is a source that in all cases of injury, one pays and does not get lashes. Good. Now, challenge to this. It's going to be the same challenge we said before. First of all, how do you know that if you give a warning for something more stringent, it covers something less stringent? Maybe not. And if you think that it is true that a warning for something greater covers something lesser, how do you know that death penalty is worse than lashes? Maybe lashes is worse. After all, I've said that the three friends of Daniel, they only were willing to give up their lives because their lives were threatened. But if they had been threatened with lashes, if they don't bow down, then they would have bowed down to the idol because lashes are scarier than death. Lerav Sama bered Rav Aseh lerav Ashe. Family Rav Sama bered Rav Ashe lerav Ashe. Okay, so we know it's a Rav Sama. The question is he the son of Rav Aseh or Rav Ashe? But either way, he told Rav Ashe. Vela shani lach ben hakaah she yesh lach kispa lach she en lach kispa. Of course, don't you make a difference between unlimited lashes and limited lashes? We're not the case of Chanem Mishav Azariah was unlimited lashes. That's scarier than death. But limited lashes that a Bet Din would give is certainly less than Bet Din. Is certainly less than death penalty. And therefore, as long as we are okay with the assumption that a warning for something greater covers something lesser, certainly death penalty is something greater than lashes. And therefore, even though this person is warned, nevertheless, he causes an injury, he pays and does not get lashes. So it's a good proof until we get to Matkif Ladav Mari, Mimai de Bemezid Venika Meketala, Dema Beshogeg Venika, Migalut Kasha. Hold on. This whole time you're assuming that law of, let's see what happens to this person who caused injury. How do you know that it's talking about someone who tries to kill someone bemezid, or tries to injure someone or kill someone bemezid? He tried to kill someone on purpose, and so that's what we're dealing with the death. Does he get death penalty or not? No, it never said anything there about the death penalty. Could be that it was unwitting, and so therefore, any case of unwitting, there's no warning, right? It's talking about a case where he was just using a hammer and it fell off. And the head fell off and killed someone. He was on the roof. He was doing something on the roof, and so a tool fell down. So, Dilma Beshogeg Venika Migalut, and it says that he will be exempt not from death penalty, but rather from having to go to an Ir Miklat, to go into exile. That's the case we're talking about, and therefore, in fact, there is no warning. And therefore, when it says if the guy gets better and he walks around, then one pays. Why does one pay and not get lashes? Maybe because there is no warning, and so therefore there's no proof from here that in all cases of injury one should pay and not get a warning. In this case, could be the only reason he pays is because there was no warning, and so there is no proof from here that in any case of injury one pays and does not get lashes, right? Maybe that's only here because there was no warning. That's why I didn't get lashes. Kashya, so we leave that with a question. The next section gets into a long discussion that goes into tomorrow's daf, so we'll stop here. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.